Hardball. Working in radio can be a very risky business because there's no job security. Sure, there may be some radio personalities who feel safe about their jobs, people like Ryan Seacrest or Howard Stern. But even the famous Don Imus ran into trouble when he made a racially offensive comment on the air in 2007 about the Rutgers women's basketball team. Without any safety net, I think most DJs, like me, are just happy to be on the air with a gig in broadcasting. If it's not the perfect station or format, you learn to make the best of it. So there I was at WRQX, playing those long album cuts that went on forever. No more Top 40 radio from me. Plenty of time to pop out for lunch while a record was spinning on the turntable. No, not really. I'd learned my lesson on that one. But I wasn't about to give up on trying to get back to what I enjoyed the most, playing the hits. I wanted out. I was frustrated, bored, and uninspired. I didn't care what went on at the station because I just wasn't interested. I was so out of touch with everything that it came as a complete surprise when I walked into work one day and heard our boss had been fired. I had no idea he was about to be let go. All of a sudden, I started listening to what everybody had to say very closely. I heard ABC was changing formats, but no one knew what was coming. Country? Classical? What now? Then, word came down. The station was about to go Top 40. Are you kidding me? Instead of hoping to break out of there, I was desperate to stay. Rumor had it the new boss was the one and only Al Brady Law, a brilliant program director who had worked in New York, Miami, and Boston. Suddenly, I was in the perfect situation to impress the famous programmer. Except for one tiny problem. For the past 4 years, I'd been playing disco, and now album rock. How was I going to show Al I could do the Top 40 gig? I took a risk. On my own, I dropped the album rock format. Before that, and before that, and before that. And I started talking to the listeners again. Really talking, having fun, making jokes. I mean, what did I have to lose? I figured he was going to come in and fire everyone anyway, so why not have a good time while I try to save my job and show off some of my skills? Al came to us from WHDH in Boston, and he brought along his news director, Doug Limerick. Doug is a great guy, originally from the South with a beautiful voice. He is the consummate professional with a slightly twisted sense of humor. Just my kind of guy. We hit it off right away. In our conversations, it came out that I was from Connecticut, had worked in Top 40 most of my life, including WDRC in Hartford. Doug was familiar with the Big D because it was one of the great music stations in New England. I was hoping he would put in a good word for me with Al. I met my new boss for the first time at a staff meeting, sitting around a huge table in the conference room. Everyone was there, the DJs, engineers, and office personnel. We sat waiting for about 20 minutes when Al finally burst through the door. He was taller than me, about 5'10", with a big belly, a thick mustache that covered his mouth, and he had a head full of black curly hair, shaped like an afro. He immediately took over the room. All attention was on Al as he slowly scanned the table, and he said, "We're taking this station Top 40, and we're gonna kick ass. I'd like to say that 1 year from now, we'll all be sitting here together at this table. But I gotta tell you, I doubt it." Later that week, Al fired every single jock at that station, except for Stoney and me. All I could think was, God bless Doug Limerick. I'm pretty sure he saved my life at ABC. Thanks, Doug. But hot damn, I was a Top 40 jock again. The new Q107 went on the air April 16th, 1979, just about 1 month away from my wedding date. Our first day on the air, Ann was homesick with the flu, and she taped my entire shift. It was such a big deal to me, I still have that recording all these years later.
Music Radio, the new Q107. This is Joe Cipriano at 1258 with more for you. Got a song you want to hear? You can give me a ring. 432.
We had a huge budget from ABC, all the money we could ever dream of to help launch the new Q. We gave away cars, trips, concert tickets, and cash. Every Thursday, every week, was $1,000 Thursday. You never knew when it was going to happen, but sometime during the day, one of us DJs played the song, Hey Jude, and caller number 107 would win the money. I was having fun again. There was even an attention-getting television commercial created for all the ABC radio stations by the advertising geniuses Chuck Bloor and Don Richmond. It was called The Remarkable Mouth. It started out with a shot of this beautiful woman with long, shaggy hair, wearing a tight T-shirt, of course, with Q107 in big letters across her chest. Chris Delisle was her name. She had clear blue eyes and a perfect smile covered in bright red lipstick. The camera started out wide, and she said, "Here's something I know you'll like." Then the shot slowly zoomed in, extremely tight, so you could only see her mouth. Next, you heard each disc jockey say something, our voices coming out of her mouth while her lips moved in perfect sync to everything we said. Believe me, in 1979, that commercial was the coolest thing anyone had ever seen on TV. She was hot, and so was the new Q. My buddy Doug did the morning show with Dude Walker. They were absolutely brilliant together. Dave Thompson handled middays. I got the afternoon drive time slot from 2 to 6, a step up from middays for me. Oh, and remember my buddy Johnny Walker from WWCO? I carried his air check from Q105 in Tampa into Al's office one day and said, "Stick this in the tape deck and crank it up, Al." Johnny was using the name Uncle Johnny in Tampa, and his act was outrageous. Johnny liked to say,
"Oh, you know, it's true. Everybody has someone crazy in their family, and that's me, the whacked-out uncle, Uncle Johnny."
Al loved him, and Johnny grabbed the early evening shift from 6 to 10. Sandy Weaver, our first female jock, had the late-night shift. By now, Stoney had made a big decision to leave radio to concentrate on acting full-time. I missed working with him, but I understood why he made that choice. Even though Stoney had left the station, he was still in town to be one of the groomsmen in my wedding. My brother Henry was my best man. Ann and I got married May 19th, 1979, at the L'Enfant Plaza Hotel in Washington, D.C., Ann's hometown. Her parents planned it all. There was a band, great food, beautiful flowers. It was one big party. All of our friends were there, from NBC, ABC, Channel 7, and both families, of course. To this day, more than 30 years later, people still tell us how much fun they had at our wedding. It's a great memory. In our very first ratings book, Q107 buried all the other stations in the city. I had struggled through the past few months, when I was fired from NBC, and then when I took a job that wasn't the right fit. But I never lost faith in myself. I was back in top 40, the #1 afternoon DJ at the #1 station in town. Doing the afternoon show from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., I had plenty of time in the morning to pursue a brand new adventure, voiceover work. Out of the blue, I started to be asked to voice local and regional commercials in Washington. I didn't know much about the voiceover world, but I quickly found out it's a nice place to visit. I worked for clients like Garfinkel's Department Store and Woodward & Lothrop, classy ads designed by the Dennenberg Agency in D.C. The owner and creative director, Elliot Dennenberg, liked my voice and started using me on a few accounts for car dealerships and other retail radio and TV work. Plus, before my shift at the Q, I made personal appearances for the station at high schools and charity functions, just like the kind of events I used to go to at WWCO in Connecticut. After my shift at 6 p.m., I either went to another meeting for the station or went out to dinner with Ann, Stoney, and Barbara. It was a great balance of work and personal satisfaction. Getting fired from NBC was quickly turning into a distant memory. Those terrible feelings were long gone. Moving into the 1980s, the Q continued to grow. As we hit the 1-year anniversary of the station and my marriage, I became more and more interested in a voiceover career. I thought being in radio teed it up perfectly. I could pursue VO while my radio show paid the bills. I became aware of the big network voices like Ernie Anderson, Danny Dark, and others who lived in Los Angeles. Dreaming about that kind of career gave me a whole new goal to reach for in my career. I talked it over with Ann, and just like that, we both decided where we were headed next. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to work in Los Angeles. If I was ever going to get a chance at national voiceover work or doing promos for networks, I thought it could only happen in L.A. We were a team, and Ann was all in, ready to find new opportunities in her own career as a TV news writer and producer. But I wouldn't allow myself to move across the country without a job in radio already lined up. I had no interest in being another out-of-work, starving actor or voiceover guy in L.A. The plan was simple. I would mail out air checks to radio stations in L.A., hoping that someone would take the bait. I loved Q107. It was high-energy fun with great music, and I knew how fortunate I was to get that job. But I'm not the kind of person who sits still for long. Like my dad, I'm always thinking of how I can make a particular situation even better and looking for what's next for me down the road. I made it my priority to get to Los Angeles, and as always, I tried to work 1 hour each day on making it happen. After 6 months of sending out tapes, I had an offer. I got a call from Jim Conley at KHTZ Radio in Los freaking Angeles.
Joe, we listened to your tape and really like what you're doing. We want to hire you at K-Hits.
My head nearly burst. This was different from the call I got from Gordon when I was still living at home in Connecticut. Back then I was a kid who would have gone anywhere without a thought about how I would get there, how much I would make, or even how I would live. This time I wasn't alone. I had Annie by my side. I knew exactly what part of L.A. I wanted to live in, and I knew I would have to take a pay cut to get there. But I thought I could make up the difference in voiceovers. I thought I was prepared for everything. But wouldn't you know it, that roller coaster was heading my way again, ready to take me down. 2 seats, please. I had a new boss at Q107. Al Brady Law had moved on to WABC in New York, and the new program director was Alan Burns, young, hip, and cool. We got along well, and I was positive he would be happy for me. The next day, I could barely wait till my shift was over to tell him about my offer. Alan, I have a wonderful opportunity. I've been offered the dream job I've been waiting for in Los Angeles. KHTZ wants to hire me for afternoons. Listen, I love Q, but I've been working towards this my whole life. I want to be fair and give you 2 or 3 weeks' notice. I mean, whatever you need. Alan was surprisingly expressionless. He just looked at me and said,
"You signed a letter of intent to enter into a contract with us. We can't let you go."
My mouth dropped, along with my stomach. Of course, I remembered signing that letter, but at the time I was told it was only to stop me and the other jocks from taking a job with the local competition at one of the other stations in Washington. All radio stations do that kind of thing. I thought that was fair. The execs at ABC didn't want to be in competition with the talent they cultivated. He said,
"ABC owns 2 stations in Los Angeles, too. We don't want you in competition with them either."
"You got to be kidding me, right?" I was stunned.
"No, Joe, I'm serious. ABC's playing hardball here."
Ooh, that hurt. I love that station and everyone there, including Alan. But as far as I knew, this was my once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They wanted to lock me into 5 years at Q107. I was 25 years old. "Alan, you want me to wait until I'm 30 years old to have the chance to follow this dream?" His answer?
"Hardball, Joe. Hardball."
Listen, I didn't blame Alan. I knew he was doing his job, but I needed help to figure this out. Were they right? Did they own me for the next 5 years? I had no idea. I had to hire a lawyer to find out the answer. My attorney's name was Julian Tepper. I didn't know anything about him except that he was a friend of a friend. He normally did litigation work for the government, and he was looking forward to doing something different. He seemed like a sharp guy to me. From the beginning, he told me, "I can take care of this for you. Don't worry." I called Jim in L.A. to tell him what was going on, and was surprised to find out he already knew. A huge corporation like ABC has plenty of lawyers on staff. Sadly, some of them were working against me. KHTZ Radio had received a cease and desist order to stop negotiating with me. Any more discussions, and ABC would take legal action against KHTZ. Damn, this really was hardball. But Jim was calm. He told me not to worry.
"Listen, Joe, this is big corporation shit. You work it out, and I'll keep a shift open for you. Good luck."
Julian put in a couple of weeks of back-and-forth arguments, but he wasn't getting anywhere. Finally, he said, "Joe, they'll keep stonewalling until you run out of money. You're never going to be able to match the amount that ABC can put into this fight with all its lawyers it has. There's only one thing left you can do. We have to use what they want so badly against them." I didn't know where he was headed, so he explained. "They want you on the air. Let's take that away from them. Go into Alan's office and tell him you can't handle it anymore. The stress of all this is just too much, and you need time off without pay. You can't do your show. You need a leave of absence." Oh, man, I never would have thought of doing something like that. It wasn't my nature. It was sneaky. It was freaking brilliant. Julian's advice went against everything my parents had taught me about being responsible and doing a good job. Making the decision even more difficult, we were in the middle of a ratings sweep, the most important time of all for radio and television stations. If your company comes out number one in the ratings, it means millions of dollars in advertising revenue for the station. But I had to trust Julian. Besides, his advice wasn't far from the truth. I was miserable, stressed out, and I felt nearly hopeless. I figured this was the only way off that roller coaster. So, right before my shift, the next day, I did it. I walked into Alan's office and told him I needed a break. He nearly fell off his chair.
You can't leave in the middle of ratings.
I know, Alan. I feel awful, but my health is more important.
Listen, do your shift today, and I'll talk to you after you get off the air, okay?
I was as nervous as I've ever been in my life, but I was also determined. This was war. Chew on that fucking hardball, I thought. After my shift, I went into Alan's office. His boss, Ernie Fears, was there too.
Joe, we're going to let you go to Los Angeles. But first, you have to agree to stay with us through the end of the November ratings. Then you can leave.
I don't know how I managed to stay so composed, but somehow I calmly answered, "That'll be just fine, Alan. No problem." I thanked Alan and Ernie, and then I called Julian for the biggest thanks of all. L.A., here I come. I was stoked. My last day on the air was a blast. I said goodbye to the Q107 listeners. See you on the left coast. The last song I played on the air in D.C. was My Life by Billy Joel.
Ah, boy. Well, I really don't have much to say.
Well, we'll say it for you.
You will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Goodbye. Get out of here.
I miss you.
Oh, thank you, Ann. But I want to thank everybody, and a lot of folks called in to say goodbye, and I have a chance to go out and do something that I've always wanted to do.
Oh, what's your name?
No.
Oh, shit.
Thanks for everything. That just about does it, I guess.
Thanks, Joe. We'll miss you. Bye.
Doug Limerick threw us a going-away party that night. Ann's parents had all their relatives over for another send-off later in the week. Early on in our relationship, my in-laws, Audrey and Albert Godelsky, accepted me as part of their family. Before we met, I'm sure they thought Ann would marry someone who was Jewish, maybe even a nice doctor or a lawyer. But she fell in love with me, a disc jockey, a Catholic boy who never went to college. Her parents trusted me, and I respected them. Ann's mom was full of energy, and her dad was a wonderful, gentle soul. After the party, when we said goodnight, it suddenly hit me. I was taking their baby girl away from them, moving her to the other side of the country. My father-in-law was a quiet, soft-spoken man, but I could see he was choked up. As Ann and I walked to her childhood bedroom where we were spending our last night in Maryland, her dad called out to her, "I love you, baby." I can't tell you how deeply I felt those words. As a parent now, I understand his sadness even more. The next morning was a bright new day. We flew up to Connecticut to say goodbye to my family, a little bit easier since I'd been living away from home for the past 6 years. It was the end of November, and we wouldn't be able to come back east for at least a few months, so we celebrated Christmas and Thanksgiving all in one. My mom outdid herself and woke up at 4 a.m. to put the turkey in the oven. We had all my favorite foods, including cavatelli and pumpkin pie. She made Ann's favorite too, apple pie. I've never ever left home without Mom giving me a package of something she made from scratch. Since we were flying out to Los Angeles, she didn't want to give me her sauce. She was afraid the container might leak on the plane. Instead, we took a tin of her homemade Christmas cookies with a promise that Mom would send more later. We said our goodbyes the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Then my big brother Hank drove us to New York for our flight to the West Coast. I had booked 2 first-class tickets out of JFK Airport on American Airlines, nonstop, to Los Angeles International. It was finally happening. We were on our way to L.A.